Hi, my name is Jen, and I'm the co-owner of the Formidable Genealogist research company, and today I'm on a genealogy road trip. I am down near New Prague, Minnesota at Frieden's Evangelical Lutheran Church, which is about, maybe 2 miles outside of town. And I have a client whose family came from Germany and helped to found this church, and I'm here to look at their records. They have records that go back to 1856, and they've agreed to let me look through them. The church that they attended wasn't on this spot, it was actually over this way behind me, and it was a log church from 1864 to 1875, and then it burned down at that point, but the records were all saved. The family I'm tracing is the Cassoon family shown here. Theodore Cassoon is my client's great-great-grandfather, and Henry Cassoon and Bertha Gentz are her great-grandparents. They have been tough branches to untangle because there aren't a lot of records available online at the state and county level for that time period, and details about this family have been entirely lost to their descendants for over 100 years. I was able to find the Minnesota State marriage certificate for my client's great-grandparents, Henry Cassoon and Bertha Gentz, from when they were married in April 1881. The pastor listed was Christian Alpers, and I did some research on him and discovered that he was the pastor of Frieden's Evangelical Lutheran Church in New Prague, Minnesota from 1875 to 1882, which prompted my reach out to that church. The church even had a history booklet available online for their 150th anniversary, which included a photo of the second church, which is the one where my client's great-grandparents would have been married. Theodore Cassoon was here by about 1865, 1866, and he lived until 1907. He lived about 1 mile from here, so he would have attended this church regularly. Henry and Bertha were married in 1881, possibly at this church. I'll see if they have records in there. They said they were married in Heidelberg in a log church, but I'm going to see if that is accurate or if maybe those records are stored here as well. I'm really hoping to find out more about Louisa Cassoon, who was a wife of Theodore. I just don't know if she was a first wife or a second wife or Henry's mother. I'm not sure. She died in 1869, so there's nothing about her in the state records. So I'm hoping the church might have something. Time to go in and see what I can find. When I arrived, I was greeted very warmly by the church secretary, who was just as excited as I was. I'd mentioned the Cassoon name to her, and she'd never heard of it, but she opened a few of the old records when she was bringing them out for me and said that she saw Cassoon everywhere and was so excited about what I might find. The entryway has this nice dedication to all of the pastors back to 1864. The first 3 pastors are the ones who would have known the Gentz and Cassoon families very well, and most of these pastors on the wall were born in Germany. There was a man in his 90s there named Wilfred Johnson. The secretary asked him if he'd ever heard of Theodore Cassoon, and he said he remembered his parents talking about him as his farm was across the street from them. It's not too often that you run into someone who remembers a person who died in 1907 being brought up in conversation. Their fellowship hall has several albums and boxes of photos that they let me look through. I found this nice cabinet card of the wooden church, which is the one that Henry and Bertha would have known and attended. There was a binder of confirmation classes, and I opened it up to find that on page 1, it listed Bertha Gentz in the 1877 confirmation class and her future sister-in-law, Louisa Cassoon, in the 1879 class. There was a large photo from 1939 on the wall of all of the church's members. Henry Cassoon's brother was pictured in it. The blue arrow points to Fred and his wife, Wilhelmina Reinke, and she's next to him in the hat. They were lifetime members of the church. Seeing this photo gives you an idea of what Henry Cassoon likely looked like, and their father, Theodore Cassoon. I started digging through the volumes of old records. Even though the church was founded in 1864, some of the records actually go back to 1858. Everything was in German, but luckily little was written in the old German script, which is illegible without major scrutiny. I was able to easily find the marriage record for Henry and Bertha at this church for April 19, 1881. There weren't many entries for them after this point as they moved farther south near Lexington and Montgomery and attended a church down there. They grew up in this church, but were not members of it as adults. There were many mentions of Theodore Cassoon in the Frieden's church book. There was a membership list showing that he became a member in fall of 1866. So that gives us a solid date that he was living in Minnesota. There was the entry for his September 1871 marriage to Johanna Brem, who was either his second or third wife. I loved seeing all of the attendance pages. I never thought that I'd be able to tell that on one Sunday in 1882, Theodore Cassoon and his wife, Henry and Bertha, and Henry's sister Louisa all went to church together. Henry and Bertha don't show up later than this entry since they have moved to a different area. On the 15th of April, 1883, Theodore and his wife and daughter Louisa all went to church as well. Theodore shows up in basically every attendance list. I came across several other bits of information just in looking through the pages and reading the entries. The top line shows Henry's brother, Fred Cassoon, marrying Anna Bushman in May 1886 at the age of 19. Then the next entry shows the birth of their first child, a daughter named Maria Johanna, about 1 year later. Then a heartbreaking entry where Fred's wife, Anna, dies in childbirth at the young age of 17. And 2 lines down from that is the death of their child, Maria Johanna, at the age of 3 months from Kinderkrankheit, which translates as child fever. I made sure to find both of them in the church cemetery, which you'll see in a few minutes. One thing I was really hoping to find in these records was verification of who Henry's mother was. I had found online that there was a stone in this cemetery from 1869 for Louisa Cassoon, wife of Theodore, but there are no records of her in Illinois or Germany or Minnesota since she lived such a short time in America and died so long ago. The only mention of her that I found in these church books was this baptism record. She and Theodore had a child named Sophia in 1868, and this record states her maiden name was Bath. One of the witnesses was a Louisa Bath, which makes me think that could be her mother. No other records for that woman seem to exist. Unfortunately, death records don't start until 1887 for the church, so several of our questions remain unanswered. Theodore Cassoon died December 20th, 1907. Since he died after state death records began and not county, I ordered his death certificate from the Minnesota Archives. I'd hoped it would have more information on it than this, like the county ones do. All information provided would have been from his last wife, Johanna Brem, who outlived him by 5 years. At the time of his death, he was thought to be about 82 years old and died of infirmities due to old age. He was still living in Helena Township, Scott County, Minnesota, at the time of his death. There was a little more information to be had on his death entry in the church records. It gives his full name as Theodor Heinrich Johann Christian or Christoph Cassoon. Cause of death is the same, and it says he had a widow, 2 sons, and a daughter. Age is a little different than the state record that said he was 82. The church record says 79. Theodore is buried in Frieden's Evangelical Lutheran Church Cemetery in New Prague. There is another wife of Theodore's buried in the same cemetery. Louisa died on August 3rd, 1869 at the age of 38. County death records don't start until 1870, so there's no record of her death, but there's a high likelihood it was related to childbirth. It is unknown at this time if she was Henry's mother or if Henry's mother died before they came to America, as his obituary said, and Louisa was Theodore's second wife. Theodore's final wife died in 1912 and is buried with him. Unfortunately, there is no record of what happened to Grandma Gertrude Cassoon, who was living with them in 1870. There are no death records for her in Scott or LeSueur counties and no known burial plot for her. She must have died sometime between 1870 and 1875, as she does not show up with the family on the 1875 Minnesota State Census. The only way to determine if Louisa was Henry's mother would be for a descendant to take a DNA test and see if the surname Bath shows up. Genetic genealogy is likely the only way to trace most of these German ancestors due to the availability of German records and massive records loss. On my visit to New Prague, I headed out to the cemetery after I finished with the church records. I'm here at the old cemetery at Frieden's Evangelical Lutheran Church near New Prague, Minnesota, and I'm going to see if I can find some very old gravestones for the Cassoon family. I thought this would be easy because I would just go for the oldest stones I could find, but they all look very old. Oh, I see some Kassoons right here. Let's see. There is Anna Bushman Kassoon. I know that she was married to Henry Kassoon's brother, Fred Kassoon, and she died not long after having a baby. Let's see. Maybe it's back this way. Wow, these are all so old. Wow. These stones are amazing. They're in really good shape. The cemetery is really well cared for. Oh, there it is. I see the Kassoons. There is Louisa. She was likely Henry Kassoon's mother. She died in 1869 on, let's see, 3rd of August. She was 38 years old. So, is this one next to her then? Theodore? Let's see. Let's see anybody in there. Maybe he is somewhere else. Let's see. Oh, I see way in the back over here. Oh, he has a big monument. Theodore Kassoon, born 27th May 1828 and died 20th of December 1907. And then his last wife, Johanna, Bream was her maiden name. She was born 28th December 1828 and died 26th December 1912. Oh, this cemetery is just gorgeous. Before I went to New Prague, I did one more pass looking through land records, since Theodore Kassoon had indicated that he owned his farmland. I finally found him on an 1898 plat map for Scott County, Minnesota. He lived on current-day Highway 19 that goes straight into New Prague. For anyone not familiar with the area, it is pronounced New Prague instead of New Prague, and it is baffling. The map shows him with a tiny parcel of land and a residence adjacent to his son and Henry's brother's land, Fred Kassoon. After I was done at the cemetery, I thought I may as well drive by, even though I'd looked at satellite view and could tell the little house by the road was no longer there, and the current house looked rather modern. Now I believe that Theodore Kassoon lived right around here. I found on an 1898 plat map where he's living with his son, Fred Kassoon, who also went by Frank. Let's see. Coming up on the farm right now. I'm gonna pull in and see if anybody's home. From the road, I could tell that it was actually an older farmhouse and not a new one. There was a woman outside weed whacking, so I got out and asked her if she knew how old her house was. She said it was from about 1900. I asked her if it belonged to Fred Kassoon, and she said that sounded right. She told me that Grandpa had a little house out by the road, but that it was moved up to this cement slab after he died. She told me she had the original papers and offered that I could come up to the house and see them. Her name is Mary Miller, and she's lived at that farm since 1970. She raised 10 children there and now lives there with one daughter. She found this photo to show me that contains Theodore Kassoon's original house. It's down by the road with the green arrow. The barn and other outbuildings are also original. Henry's brother, Fred Kassoon, built the larger farmhouse in 1900, and Mary Miller's family added on quite a bit for their large family in the 70s. She gave me a tour of every room in the whole house and showed me the additions she and her deceased husband put on the house and told me all about the original floor plan and how things looked when Fred Kassoon lived there. Henry, Bertha, and Theodore Kassoon all would have spent time in this home. Sure enough, she had a list of all of the land transfers and an original abstract of Fred Cassoon's. It shows that Theodore Cassoon procured the land for $500 in November 1866, so about the same time that he joined Frieden's Lutheran Church. Then in 1886, the land passed into the ownership of Fred Cassoon. Mary offered to let me borrow the paperwork and send it back to her, but I didn't want to be responsible for mailing back something irreplaceable like that. I'm so glad that I took a chance and pulled into that driveway. Here's the earliest known picture of New Prague's main street from about 1870. So this is about how it would have looked when the Cassoons arrived from Germany. I really learned a lot on my genealogy road trip, and it's definitely worthwhile to reach out to a church because sometimes they don't have anything, and sometimes you can be really surprised at what they do have and how happy they are to share it with you. The Formidable Genealogist is a small family history research company consisting of 2 passionate and tenacious genealogists in the Midwest. In addition to research, we can also help people find their biological family through DNA, scan and digitally repair photos, slides, negatives, and documents, and create personalized family tree artwork based off of 30 or more templates on our website. Happy searching!